what we're attempting to do is just become a community together. We're making the shift from this idea that our spiritual life is really about more information to deeper encounter. And that what it means to be Christian really is to show up for your life as it is, not as you want it to be, but in some ways accepting where you're at. And that's the exact place where God resides, right? That God does not have a carrot, nor does he have a stick. God is love. And God shows up in our life as love to liberate us into a deeper sense of ourselves. Kierkegaard has this prayer. I love this prayer. He says, "Now with God's help, I shall become myself." Dang, right? I mean, I need, that's my prayer for my children. That's my prayer over time for myself. Now with God's help, I shall become myself. And so one of the ways that we do that is not just in a therapist's office. It's not just for those of us in 12 steps. It really is in community together in relationship. The Ubuntu saying that I am because we are, right? Deep, deep wisdom of folks from around the world that have figured this out. That our spiritual lives are a we program, not a me program. This is not a self-help deal that you've stepped into this morning. Some of you are way beyond help for yourself. Hey, we've got for you recovering Baptists, we got front row seats up here. So, and so the text, we're going to look at a text today, and we're going to kind of look at this kind of whole thing that we've been doing about growth and about how we grow, and some of it is just kind of a quarter turn. It's not like throwing out everything. It's just realizing that the spirituality we've been given, it's bigger. The map is bigger. The map is more tender. It's more gracious. It's more expansive. And so we're walking into those things together. And so the text that we have today, and then this is our last movie in memes. And so let me put the text up. And then, yeah, if you do whatever you want to do. You can sit, you can do an interpretive dance in this if you want to.
You don't want that this morning.
Okay.
All right, this is John 15. I am the real vine, and my Father is the farmer. He cuts off every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes, and every branch that is grape-bearing he prunes back so it will bear even more. You are already pruned back by the message I have spoken. Live in me, make your home in me, just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered up and thrown on the bonfire. But if you make yourselves at home with me and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is. When you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples.
That's great. Can we pause just for a second? When I heard that as a kid, that felt coercive to me, because this is what I heard. I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you don't produce, there is a fire waiting for you. Can I get an amen? Yes. Okay. Y'all are all going to go to hell. Okay. That's basically the message I got if I didn't produce, if I wasn't a good person. Like, that cannot be farther from the truth. When you hear it in this language that Eugene Peterson says, he says, make your home in me. Make your true home in me. Fall in love in this place of belonging. Because it's only the place of belonging that can produce the life that we desire. Your father or your mother or your grandfather or your grandfather's voice is, and maybe that's a voice of constriction, maybe it's a voice of love, but any of those voices of constriction that come to us are unable to set us free and to produce the place of love. Only belonging can, only tenderness can. And so when we come to John, and Jesus says, make your home in me. Belong in me. Fall in love in this place. And out of that place, you're going to produce so much fruit. And here's the deal. The things that don't produce fruit, I'm going to trim away. Anybody have any kind of branches that are not producing great fruit? Right? Now, this is not God going, like, and a lot of times that's what we feel like when we show up in the church, that what God's going to do is take like the Home Depot. They let you rent stuff. They should not let you rent at Home Depot. The chainsaw, and just start whacking stuff off because you're not. That's not it. It's this thing that in love you begin to let go of. We learn what Eugene Peterson calls the unforced rhythms of grace. Unforced, irresistible grace, love. So that's the abiding that Jesus is talking about there. Okay.
All right. This is Ephesians 4. In light of all this, here's what I want you to do. While I'm locked up here, a prisoner for the master, I want you to get out there and walk. Better yet, run. On the road God called you to travel. I don't want any of you sitting around on your hands. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline, not in fits and starts, but steadily pouring yourself out for each other in acts of love, alert at noticing differences, and quick at mending fences.
Thank you. The movie that we're going to watch a clip of today is probably one of my top 10 favorite movies from Goodwill. It's called Good Will Hunting. There are a couple of scenes or lines that it's almost Pavlovian for me that I will start to cry, right? One of those happens in this movie. We're not going to show it because I already watched it this morning and I already cried. So done. It's not your fault. And Move That Bus for any of those of you who saw that with an extreme home makeover. That always made me cry too. So those two lines, I don't know why. Okay, TMI. But in the movie, in the clip that we're going to watch, the therapist who's played by Robin Williams has been working with Will, who has these deep traumas from his childhood. Really a deep sense that he has never belonged anywhere except for these friends that he has made in his adolescence and part of his young adulthood. And it becomes quite apparent that he has all of these defense mechanisms that are hanging out over his wounds or impeding his ability to grow. Let me say that again. He has a lot of wounds in him and these defense mechanisms that are built up around that so that he can't grow anymore. And what basically the scene is and he's really smart, right? And he's really sharp with his tongue, all ways of staying away from the wound, protecting himself. And so this wonderful counselor shows up in his life and begins to show him a different way and a different path and show him an alternative way of living, which we all need at some point in our life. So this is, I think they took out all the cussing too. So I'm hopefully that our communications team did that.
Taster's choice moment between guys.
Hey, Ruby, can you turn that up?
This is really nice. You got a thing for swans? Is this like a fetish? It's something like maybe we need to devote some time to?
Thought about what you said to me the other day about my painting. Stayed up half the night thinking about it. Something occurred to me. I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep and haven't thought about you since. You know what occurred to me?
No.
You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea of what you're talking about.
Why, thank you.
It's all right. You've never been out of Boston.
Nope.
So if I asked you about art, you'd probably give me the skinny on every art book ever written. Michelangelo. I know a lot about him. Life's work, political aspirations, him and the Pope, sexual orientation, the whole works, right? I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling. Seen that. If I ask you about women, if you ever give me a syllabus of your personal favorites, you may have even been laid a few times. But you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy. You're a tough kid. I ask you about war, you probably throw Shakespeare at me, right? Once more into the breach, dear friends. But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend's head in your lap and watch him gasp his last breath looking to you for help. I ask you about love, you probably quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Known someone that could level you with her eyes. Feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you. Who could rescue you from the depths of hell. And you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel. To have that love for her be there forever. Through anything. Through cancer. And you would know about sitting up in a hospital room for 2 months, holding her hand, because the doctors could see in your eyes that the terms visiting hours don't apply to you. You don't know about real loss, because that only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself. I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much. I look at you, I don't see an intelligent, confident man. I see a cocky, scared, kid. But you're a genius, Will. No one denies that. No one could possibly understand the depths of you. But you presume to know everything about me because you saw a painting of mine. You ripped my f***ing life apart. You're an orphan, right? Do you think I'd know the first thing about how hard your life has been? How you feel, who you are, because I read Oliver Twist? Does that encapsulate you? Personally, I don't give a shit about all that, because you know what? I can't learn anything from you. I can't read in some book. Unless you want to talk about you, who you are. Then I'm fascinated. I'm in. But you don't want to do that, do you, sport? You're terrified of what you might say. Your move, Chief.
I just love that movie. Your move, Chief. There's a deep sense in which our spiritual life can become a way in which we use language to stay away from ourselves. Again, Kierkegaard says there's a man often that look like if you see him from a far way off, he's walking towards you. And so you wait and you realize all along he's been walking away from you. That often we can use spiritual language and as a way of walking away from each other instead of letting it to be a bridge towards each other. And I think that there lives within each of us a deep desire to be known and to belong. I think that's the deepest thing that lives in all of us. I think all of our achieving, all of our deep sense of the defense mechanisms around our wounds, and all of us have it. The word innocent just means without wounds. None of us are innocent in this place. And so we walk with each other in those places. And I think that the spiritual life, the one that we're attempting at least to discover here, is not one that zaps us out of the place, but really begins to build capacities for us to walk into those places of transformation. Does that make sense? And so the life that we desire doesn't get zapped into us. It's a summoning to do deeper work, to go into deeper places. Pemmy Children, I'll talk about her in a bit, has a book called The Places That Scare You, which is a great title and a great book. And so there's a sense in which part of the way that we understand our own spiritual life is to be summoned to our own life to show up. It's your move. And part of the second half of life spirituality is really just that. For those of you who was here last week when Robert Hilliker spoke? I thought it was just great. I listened to him on the podcast and stuff. He's just really insightful. You can hear him on different places. I think it's encapsulates a lot of what we're attempting to do here from the point of psychology. It was deeply helpful. He left with a question at the end that has been kind of rolling around in my own heart this week. And it's this: if you knew you were going to die, would you be living like you are? If you knew that this was the end, what ways would you give up? What would you do differently? How might you approach your life differently? What small ego projects are you involved in that you realize has more to do with control than liberty? Has more to do with being numb than being alive? There is a verse out of Philippians where Paul says, there is a life that is really life. And most of us desire that kind of life. We just don't know how to enter into it. And often we enter into it. What Richard Rohr says, and I think he's riffing off of some Young and probably everybody else in the world, but it's great love or it's great pain. That love breaks us open to realize, oh, this is what I've always wanted. I've always wanted to abide, to a place of belonging, to live. And often in our own great pain, we come to the end of ourselves, the end of our own road, and we think, surely there's got to be a better way. You hear Paul echo in 1 Corinthians, now let me show you a more excellent way. Not the way that we've been walking is wrong and you're going the road to hell. It's just like it can't get us there. And so part of the invitation is to really begin to do some deeper evaluation. I have a mentor who says that our life begins twice. The day we are born and the day we accept the radical existential fact that our life, for all its delimiting factors, is essentially ours to choose. Which is just his way of saying, it's your poop, what you going to do with it? That's a loose translation of existential fact. that we come into our life with these things, and we hope that over time they will be metabolized and just go away. And then we get into our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and we realize that some of the things that we have done all along have persisted and they're not going away. And that our level of denial is just too much energy anymore. And we either burn part of the house down or we move into a place of saying, how do we transform? What is the place of transformation? And that place, that summoning is always, I think, the deeper spiritual place. And some of us are in that place where we are kind of facing that fork in the road that says, okay, I've done the education. I know who, when people ask me at a cocktail party what I do, I got it. I've done these things, but there's still this rumbling in my soul that there's something else, this incomplete. And I think that what this mentor is saying is that for all of its delimiting factors, and it's not ever going to be pretty, and it's never going to be perfect, but that you say, this is my one and only life. How do I want to live it? What is my soul? What does God require of me? And because of that, I think that then we begin to ask different questions. We read the Bible in different ways. It's not about an evacuation plan for the faithful. It's about how close we get and walk with each other along the path, no matter in what stage of life we are in. And so I have often wondered, what then does it mean to grow up? I mean, that's a question, isn't it? This is the question that really the subject of Ephesians. We read it out of the Message, but this is what Paul says. I'm writing these things so that you might grow up. Like you might mature. Right? And I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm in a 50-something-year-old body, and I've got adolescent tendencies in me. My wife is right there. She's like, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when I ask you, my hunch is that like we think, okay, puberty, that's when I grow up. Oh, when I raise my hand and say, I've done my education, can I have that job? Okay, that's when I grow up. When we get married, okay, that's when I grow up. When I have kids, that's when and there's not markers along the way of really kind of telling us how to take hold of our lives so that we live it in this place where this is our one and only life. It is my response. I'm responsible for it. I can't control it. That's a different energy. Does that make sense? Being responsible to your life actually should lead you to a deeper place of surrendering your life rather than manipulating, controlling everyone around you. And so we learn, I think, by the time we're 15, how to factor different fractions and how to do mathematical equations that maybe balance equations, but we don't know how to hold these desperate and disparate things of our life together. We just don't like the way we feel, and so we enter into behaviors to numb the way we feel, and we wake up and pop up 20 years later, and we think, holy crap. I thought, God, you were going to take this away from me. I thought if I did these things and I was a good person, I did, right? We have this if-then relationship with God. And so we come to a crisis of faith often in the second half of our life. And some of us walk away. I did for a couple of years. I'll talk about that sometime. Some of us... the T-shirt analogy, we just press that bad boy on us and keep walking. Yank that thing off and no one's looking so we can breathe some. And then there's also the summons to come back together and to reimagine this life in Christ based on not control of outcomes, but surrendering to the process. And so partly I wonder, we don't learn this in church. I mean, should we learn this in church, how to grow up? I mean, shouldn't we learn in church how to hold these disparate things together in a way of abiding in love? And I really believe that that's the call of what it means to be Christian, and that's what it calls to enter into a deeper spirituality. And so often I think that if you were to go to a restaurant with someone, and you were to ask them across the table from you, or a cup of coffee, or hanging out with someone, where do you need to grow up? My hunch is that there's something that comes up for you. Does anybody have? I'm not going to ask anybody where that is, but does that make sense? Often it's like when somebody says, "Hey Matt, where do you need to grow up?" It's not like, well. It's like a toll booth. They're all trying to get through at once, right? I get it. Okay, right? And so what we realize is that often we use all of the activity of our lives. We use different ways of numbing ourselves to never look at that question, which is just maybe Jesus' other way of asking, what do you want? I always find that really funny when Jesus rocks up to a really sick person and says, what do you want? Because often we live with our sicknesses for so long that we don't even realize until somebody asks us, what do we want? Where do you need to grow up? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to face in this time of your life? Just to acknowledge, to become aware of. Because as we say over and over in this place, awareness really is the key to a different type of living and being with each other. So the question really is, where do we grow up? One of the things that Robert talked about last week was this kind of initiation rites within our own culture and really indigenous and other cultures. I've been thinking about that a lot, actually with him and some other folks about what that means. I think that, I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but that's never stopped me. I really think that we don't do confirmation really well. I think confirmation in church should be a rite of passage where the whole of the community gets around as an initiation rite. And there ought to be multiple initiation rites where it's not about information, but it really is about a group of people that have dealt and are dealing with their own brokenness, walking up with kids saying, we're going to give you a t-shirt, you're going to outgrow it. You're going to outgrow it. But this is the teachings of the tribe, in a sense, right now. This is what we're doing. And once you understand, information is not enough, but it gets you into the parking lot, a parking lot. And the parking lot's beautiful, and we're going to tailgate there for as long as we can. But really, it's to get in the game. And the game is inside of you, and it's in between you, and it's around you. And the information of this is going to be helpful, but it's not the game. And I think we could reimagine in church structures what rites of passages look like. Robert talked about 6 or 5 or 6 of those. I've been really thinking of them for this week's purpose in sections of about 3 things that happen. How do you know what's going to happen? What is the Holy Spirit going to collude in you and with you to grow you up? What's going to happen? And I think that one of the things in initiation rites that happen is a deep separation. It's the first part of an individual's journey. Again, Robert talked just about this in indigenous tribes. They take a kid away sometimes in the middle of the night, and they put them in a place and they separate them. If you've ever had a kid that you've had to take to treatment, there's a separation. If you've ever had to say goodbye to a kid before they go to college, there's a separation. And what the community is saying is that we want you to learn how to live with what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Like, how do you live in a place where you think the only place I can find comfort is here in this place with these things and these accoutrements in this community? And what we are to do, I think the path that God takes us on, is this deep place of experiences of separation. Places where we are not in control. Places where we feel like we don't have the resources for what is up against us. Places where we feel like that I don't know how the outcome of this is going to happen, and I can't engineer it. I can't control it. I can't be good enough to tell you what the outcome is. I feel actually separate from the power that I need and the place that I'm at. So often these initiation rites take place in this deep portion, in this deep place of separation. Sarah and Trevor Barnett came by with Timothy last night. They live in our neighborhood. And I just love that little guy. He's in that place of separation anxiety where he used to run to me. Now he's like, right? Don't know about you. And often what happens within us, because we find and we think that the whole of our life is to angle and to put us in a place of comfort, that anything that feels uncomfortable, we then label emotionally, spiritually, psychologically as wrong. And so we want to stay away from it. This is crazy. there's a guy, neurobiologist by the name of Huberman. And there's new studies that are being done in the brain that every time you do something difficult, there's a part of the brain that grows. Every time that you decide, I'm not going to do that, or I am going to do that, get up, work out. Choose maybe to look at some behaviors in your life around where the internet takes you, how much you're drinking, the reaction that you have over things you can't control. Every time you don't give in to an impulse, that part of you grows. He says this is the crazy thing. Once you like it, it quits growing. And so there needs to be this constant need of kind of challenge in your life. Once you realize that you get up and you're like, oh, I love working out. Let's go. It stays the same, but it doesn't grow. And so it grows only if you're facing things, asking yourself, where do I need to grow up? And neurobiologists are beginning, this is crazy, neurobiologists are beginning to call this part of the brain the will to live. The will to live. How are we going to face things that we don't want to face? Being deposited in places in our own journey that we don't have control over, when everything that you've ever been taught is that God's going to be a warm blanket and a glass of milk and you're going to be okay. And if there's ever any problems, why have you forsaken me, God? And what I want to say is we have to grow up. That our growth comes from facing those things and grieving the fact that God's love is God's power. That's the only power that God has. Not to rapture you out and put you over, but to open your life up so that we can take each other's hands and walk through it with each other under the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of being together, of belonging. And some of us are waiting for a boat that's never going to come. And all along, I think the summoning is to a deeper life. And so this idea of separation puts us in a place of deep, deep dissonance. Pema Chodron wrote a book called Comfortable with Uncertainty. And really it is how do we learn how to live in uncertain times? We're not taught that. In fact, our God becomes a way of securing our uncertainty rather than saying, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, what happens? I'll fear no evil. It doesn't say, yea, when you get to the valley of the shadow of death, if you pray enough or are a good enough person, they rapture you, out of that crap, and I will deposit you into a better place. That's not it. The whole of the Scripture, whether you're looking at Genesis or Exodus or Jesus' life, will say over and over and over, the only way out is through. And as we go through, the Holy Spirit does all these things to make us into a new creature, new community, new relationships. But because of that, we have to get comfortable with uncertainty. And in this place of uncertainty, often these questions come up for us. What do I want to do? What do I want? What is my soul asking of me? And often my excuse is, I got too much stuff to do, soul. Will you give me a break? I got kids to raise. I got things to, those things, right? But underneath it all, there is a summoning to really begin to integrate these things, ask these questions. What does my soul require? Where am I supposed to grow up right now? Where am I being called to look at, to face? To increase this place inside of my body that scientists call the will to live, that only come from facing things. And I think along the way, in this place of dissonance, in this place of separation, we begin to become face to face with not the life that others want us to live, not the life of our mentors or our parents or our culture, but there's a rumbling underneath it that says, I may do the same things, but how do I hold this? What do I want? What is my way? Not in a prideful way, but what is the way that only I can live in order to live in congruence and in freedom under the power of God's Spirit. And that's the summonsing. That's the call of the Holy Spirit on our lives. And often, I think fear gets in the way. And so we often will cut a deal with these things and say, and I think that's why often we settle for success rather than freedom. Because having a ton of crap feels like it's successful and it feels good and it's like, well, but often that doesn't like transfer into like emotional freedom, right? And that's why you can get to where you have everything that you ever have wanted. And I look at you on Facebook and I think, God, you're crushing it, right? And I get to know you or you get to know me, and there's this rumbling in my soul of like, is this it? Because often what we've done is we have said, I will settle for success, where our soul doesn't give a crap about success. It wants us to be free. It wants us to be connected. It wants us to walk into a life in a different way. And so I think that that's the summonsing. This other part of the initiation rite is not just being separate from and learning to live with uncomfortability, but really this space that is called liminality. Or, as I like to call it, where the heck am I and how do I get out of this? Liminal space is what Leslie Newbegin calls the already but not yet. It's what addicts call a head full of AA and a belly full of beer. It's like not working anymore. When you realize that there's a different way and you don't have to be this numb, but you're still drinking a ton and you're like, this is not working. And the liminal space that we're in realizes that I'm off the map, I've stepped off the map and I'm in a new place. Where the heck am I? And our first reaction is to get out of it. So often we retract back into comparing and success stuff. And actually this place of liminality, I don't know where I am, is deeply sacred. It's a place for some of us that creates so much psychic distress that it creates an anxiety in us or a depression in us that we have to weather till we realize this isn't a mental health issue that I have. This is my life asking me questions that I don't know what to do with. And so as we stand in that place of liminality, where the heck am I and what do I do? I've done all of this to lead me to this. What do I do now? That place becomes holy ground. That's the place where God brings us to strip us of ego, to strip us of these identity things so that we might then move in a deeper and more free way in our lives. And then part of that is, I was thinking about Dante's Inferno. I've read that again, and I just discovered that this week. It was written, and it starts on Maundy Thursday, and it's this whole kind of story about folks in their middle of the passage, this middle age, that have gotten and deposited themselves in this place of liminality. This is written in the 1300s, right? 1300s? 1300? I don't know. It's written a long time ago. I'm adding a digit or subtracting a digit in that date, so I'm not exactly sure. It was written a long time ago. And I'm realizing that for thousands of years, we have all dealt with this. This is not a modern thing. This is a human thing. And part of Dante's Inferno comes to a place where he is walking along with Virgil, this mentor of his, and he gets to this ring of fire, and Virgil says to him, you must go through this ring of fire. You must go through this passage, and I cannot be with you. And Dante is like, no friggin' way. I mean, you've been with me through the descent, the necessary descent of me being deposited in this place that I'm out of control, and the presence is here, and you're telling me the presence that has guided me here is now going to leave me? And Virgil says, I have to leave you. You have to go through this, but I'll meet you on the other side. And so Dante, through all the genuflecting and not wanting to, decides that this is the only way forward. And he walks through it, and it is horrific. If you've ever been in that space that you don't know how to get from here to there, It's that space. And he gets to the end of that space, and Virgil is nowhere to be found. That sucker is gone, right? And he's angry. He's like, where'd he go? Right when I need him, he disappears. And he realizes as he continues his journey that Virgil has now been internalized into him. The voice of love, the voice of presence, the voice that says, I will never leave you or forsake you. Though your sin be as scarlet, I'll wash it white as snow. You belong. Abide in me. Know me. Fall in love with me. The tender voice of that which has no name and is every name in his divine presence now lives inside of him. And he no longer needs external things to validate him because he's walked through a fire. And that whole thing is internalized within him now. And what I want to say is that that is the work. That's the work of the Spirit, is to not get out of liminal spaces, but to ask the question, what does my soul require? How am I to grow up? What do you want? And then we get to this place, this return, this reorder, this reintegration, whatever you want to call it. It's really where two things can be true. That I am a freaking mess, and I'm deeply loved by God. That I have no way of understanding where I'm going, but I trust that it's going to be okay. Those two things can be true, right? In a type of spirituality that we were given as kids, only one could be true. And if there was any doubt that resided in you, if there was any fear that resided in you, that was Satan. We're going to cast that demon out or you're going to go to hell. That's a caricature, but that lives inside me as real. But when we get through the liminal space and we realize that Virgil has been internalized, that the Holy Spirit lives in us, that things are reordered, and we no longer have to move in ways that engender judging others, judging ourselves in that space, but the very belovedness of God resides in us, and we can become that and take risks in our lives moving forward. So let me ask this as we close. It's your move, Chief. Some of you have the adventures to go on. And reading about the Sistine Chapel is not enough to stand under that beauty. Some of you have played it safe in relationships all of your life. But you don't know what it means to be intimate. Some of you have tried to secure your life so well, but you are so afraid of death. Some of you have a wounded little girl and a wounded little boy that lives inside of you, and all you can do is control your own kids because you're trying just to redo it differently for yourself. And the invitation, the summonsing is to look at that stuff, to hold that out before one another and to God, and to say, where do I need to grow? And allow the abiding, loving, overwhelming, belonging presence of God lead you there.